Leave. There's no room. He didn't flinch when he said it, just opened the door halfway, scanned me from head to toe, and spoke like I was someone peddling coupons, not his daughter. My little girl stood beside me, clutching her teddy bear in both arms, boots damp from the snow. I opened my mouth to respond, to explain, to plead maybe, but I stopped myself. We turned around and walked back down the porch, into the December wind. She didn't say a word. Neither did I. My name is Emily Carr, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever knocked on your own family's door and felt like a trespasser? It was Christmas night, the one night you think the world will soften. But apparently, there was no space left in my family, not even for me and my 7-year-old daughter. The driveway was full. My brother's new SUV, my parents' 2 cars, my aunt's minivan. There were lights in every window, music playing, the smell of cinnamon rolls floating out from the cracks in the door they just closed on us. And still, no room. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just drove. The roads were quiet, snowflakes catching the light as they fell. My daughter asked quietly, "Why didn't Grandpa want us there?" I said the only thing I could think of. Some people forget who's family until they need something. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. I nearly didn't pick up, but when I saw the name flash across the screen, Grandma Ruth, I knew something was wrong. She never called unless it was urgent, and she never yelled. But tonight, she was furious. Her voice tore through the speaker like fire. "Come back, right now, and don't stop until you're standing in my kitchen." I didn't ask questions. I turned the car around. When we retained, the front door was wide open. The music was off. The living room lights were too bright, and everyone was silent, like the air itself had cracked. My dad stood in the foyer, arms crossed, lips tight. My mom was wringing her hands near the fireplace. And my brother, my golden child brother, was seated on the couch, looking like a boy who just got caught stealing from the cookie jar. And then I saw her, Grandma Ruth, standing in the center of the room like a storm in pearls. She turned to me and smiled, a sharp, knowing smile, and held out her arms. "Emily, sweetheart, welcome home." Then she turned to the rest of the room, and what she said next broke open the first crack in the lie this family had built around me. The room had gone dead quiet. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the next room and the ticking of the clock above the fireplace. Grandma Ruth turned toward my father, arms folded now, not in love, but in warning. "You turned your daughter away. On Christmas." My dad opened his mouth to defend himself, but she didn't give him the chance. She arrived with a child, Joseph, in this snow, and you shut the door like she was trash. She looked at my mom next, and you stood there like you didn't have a voice. My mom's cheeks flushed pink. "It wasn't like that." "Exactly like that," Grandma snapped. "I watched the whole thing from the upstairs window." My breath caught. She had seen. I watched my granddaughter and great-granddaughter walk away with nothing but a teddy bear and a broken heart. On the night our family is supposed to come together. My daughter clung tighter to my coat. She was trembling. I bent down beside her. "It's okay, baby. You're safe now." Grandma saw that too. She blinked hard and turned to the others. "You all think this family is something you own. You treat Emily like a spare part. You forget who cooked for you, helped you with bills, who was always there, until she stopped giving." She took a deep breath. "Well, if she's not family to you, then neither are you to me." The room stilled. My brother stood up finally. "Okay, this is getting ridiculous. She always plays the victim. Maybe if she showed up more." "Don't." Grandma cut him off so hard the air snapped. "Not another word." He scoffed, then glanced at my dad for backup. But this time, even Dad looked away. Grandma turned to me and said, in a calm, deliberate voice, "Emily, from this night forward, this house is yours." I blinked. "What?" I've updated the will, the deed, the accounts. It's done. The room exploded. What the hell are you talking about, Mom? My father barked. You're handing her everything, my brother shouted. She's the only one who didn't come here tonight expecting something. And she's the only one who didn't forget how to be decent. My mom whispered, but we're family. Grandma laughed, but it wasn't warm. No, you stopped being family when you let pride speak louder than love. I stood frozen. My daughter looked up at me, confused. Mommy, are we staying here now? I didn't know how to answer. Grandma stepped closer, touched my cheek. I should have done this years ago, but I kept hoping they'd change. I see now. I was waiting for nothing. She handed me a folded piece of paper. Call the lawyer after Christmas. Everything's been notarized. I took it with shaking hands. This couldn't be happening. I came tonight thinking we'd maybe get leftovers and awkward silence. Instead, my daughter and I were being handed the keys to something I never thought I'd have. Belonging. But more than that. I saw something in their eyes now that I'd never seen before. Fear. Not of me, but of the truth. Because the truth was, they needed me more than I ever needed them. And Grandma? She saw it. She saw what they buried. And she dug it back up with fire in her hands. Later that night, after everyone had stormed off in a mix of shame and shock, I sat in the kitchen with her while my daughter fell asleep on the couch, warm and safe for the first time all day. Grandma poured us both tea and said softly, "You don't owe anyone the version of you that suffers quietly." And for the first time in my life, I believed her. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the kitchen tiles like nothing had happened. But everything had. I stood at the sink rinsing mugs when I heard footsteps. Not soft ones, angry ones. My father. He didn't knock. Just walked in like it was still his house. "Emily," he said flatly, "we need to talk." I turned slowly. My daughter was still asleep in the den, her face calm, fingers curled around her stuffed bear. I kept my voice low. "Not here." He followed me onto the back porch. Snow still coated the deck, untouched from the night before. The wind was sharp. So was his tone. "I don't know what kind of stunt you and your grandmother pulled last night, but it ends now." I crossed my arms. There was no stunt, just truth. "You think she can just hand over everything. That's not how this works." I almost laughed. "You mean how it's always worked for you?" He stepped closer. "Don't push me." There it was. The father I knew. Not the quiet, emotionally distant one. No, the one who snapped when control slipped through his fingers. I didn't blink. "You pushed me out. Last night. In front of my child. She shouldn't have been here in the first place. You're always showing up when you need something." That did it. I stepped in, close enough for him to feel it. I didn't come for money. I didn't come for food. I came so my daughter wouldn't think Christmas meant being alone. He looked away. She was shivering. "Dad, you closed the door on a little girl." He said nothing. And for once, that silence was the most honest thing he'd ever given me. I walked back inside without waiting for his apology. I knew it would never come. Later that day, I sat with Grandma Ruth on the sunroom couch. She was reading her old recipe book, her glasses low on her nose. "You know," she said, not looking up, "your father was the same way with your mother when they first married. Cold, controlling, always sure the world owed him something." I said nothing, just listened. She turned the page. "He never forgave you for not turning out like your brother, but I never forgave him for trying to make you the same." I looked at her. She finally met my eyes. "You were never less. You were more. They just didn't know what to do with that." I swallowed hard. He's not going to let this go. "No," she agreed, "but neither will I." She reached into a folder by her side and pulled out another document. "This is a letter I've written to the family attorney. It outlines every choice I made, why I made it, and that I was of sound mind when I did. Let them try. I'm ready. I felt my chest tighten. All my life, I thought I was alone in the battle to prove I mattered. But Grandma? She'd been fighting beside me the whole time. That night, my brother texted me for the first time in months. Nice power play. You always were good at crying at the right time. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have words, but because I finally didn't need his approval. I set my phone down, walked into the den, and pulled a blanket over my sleeping daughter. Her little hand twitched and clutched the fabric tighter. She didn't know what had happened, but she would know, one day, what it meant. To be claimed, to be protected, to come from a woman who didn't beg for space, but built her own. 2 days after Christmas, the letter came. A formal envelope slipped through the brass mail slot, landing on Grandma's front rug with a quiet thump. She was in the kitchen humming softly. I picked it up and froze when I saw the return address. McIntyre and Locke, LLP. Our family's longtime law firm. The same one that handled every estate matter, every trust, every transaction for generations. I handed it to Grandma without a word. She opened it calmly, almost like she'd been waiting for it. Her eyes scanned the paper. Then she let out a small sigh, not of surprise, but of confirmation. They are challenging it, she said. My throat tightened. What does that mean? It means your father and uncle hired a lawyer to contest the transfer of assets. She folded the letter, set it on the counter, and sipped her tea. They are making their move. I braced myself. Can they undo it? She smiled, not kindly. Not unless I drop dead or lose my mind in court. And I don't plan on doing either. Her composure made me feel both comforted and afraid. Emily, she said, setting down her cup, they'll come for you next. Not with fists. With guilt. With whispers. With questions like, are you sure this is fair? And wouldn't your brother have used the house better? You have to know who you are before they try to convince you otherwise. I nodded slowly. I'm ready. But I wasn't. Not really. That night, my mother showed up. She didn't call. Just arrived with a box of old photo albums in her hands and a tight, fake smile. I thought maybe you'd like to look through these. With your daughter, she said. I didn't invite her in. I stepped out onto the porch. She's asleep, I said. She nodded, shifting uncomfortably. Can we talk? I didn't respond. I just waited. She sat on the bench. I stayed standing. I know how it looked that night, she began. But we weren't trying to be cruel. We just didn't expect you. The house was full, and your dad had. You told my child there was no room, I said flatly. She winced. It was your father who said that. And you stood behind him, like always. She looked down at her hands. I came here to say, I didn't fight for you like I should have. I didn't speak, not because I didn't hear her, but because the apology came 20 years too late. Your grandma has always had a soft spot for you, she said next, voice turning. You know that. She's always chosen you over the rest of us. I tilted my head. No, she chose right over comfortable. There's a difference. She blinked at that. So this is it? You're keeping it all. Do you think I asked for any of this? I said, suddenly sharp. Do you think I planned to show up on Christmas and walk away owning the house I grew up in? She made a decision, and it's not mine to revise because it makes you squirm. Her lip quivered. We're still your parents. You stopped being that the moment you turned your back on me and my daughter. Silence. Then she stood, smoothed her coat, and handed me the photo box. These were yours anyway. I took them, not out of forgiveness, but because the past deserves a shelf, not a place at my table. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table flipping through the photos. Me as a little girl in birthday hats. Me holding my baby brother. My mom smiling in most of them, but never looking at me. Always past me. That's how it had always been. But not anymore. Now, I didn't need to be seen to know I mattered. Because the woman I was becoming, she didn't just survive abandonment. She turned it into inheritance. The new year came quietly. No fireworks. No champagne. Just me, Grandma Ruth, and my daughter huddled on the couch in pajamas, watching a movie we'd seen a dozen times. But something about that night felt different. Because this time, I wasn't watching someone else's story. I was living my own. Grandma fell asleep halfway through the movie. My daughter too. I stood in the hallway afterward, staring at the front door, the same one that had been closed in my face just days ago. Funny how quickly wooden hinges become symbols, and how quickly a family turns into strangers. The next morning, I found a folded note on the kitchen table. Grandma's handwriting, neat and unwavering. Gone to the lawyers to finalize trust paperwork. Breakfast is in the oven. Tell your daughter I made the muffins she likes. Ruth, even in chaos, she was consistent. Later that afternoon, the doorbell rang. I expected a package. It wasn't. It was Caleb, my brother. I opened the door halfway, just like my father had done to me. He noticed. Really, he said. That's how we're doing this now. I raised an eyebrow. I thought you liked irony. He shoved his hands in his coat pockets. I just want to talk. I waited. I didn't ask Mom and Dad to challenge the will, he said. That was all them. I said nothing. He continued. But yeah, I was mad. You waltz in after being gone for years and suddenly everything's yours. That one made me laugh. A short, sharp sound that surprised even me. I waltzed in. I repeated. You mean the night I knocked on the door and got turned away like a beggar? He looked away. You didn't even look at me, I said. You sat on that couch while your niece stood in the snow. I didn't know what was happening, he muttered. No, Caleb, you didn't care. He took a deep breath, like he was rehearsing something. Okay, you're right. I messed up. But you got what you always wanted, didn't you? That made me pause. What exactly do you think I wanted? I asked. He shrugged. Grandma's approval. The house. The legacy. I stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind me. I wanted one thing. Just one. To come home and not feel like I was unwelcome. That's it. Not the money. Not the house. Not the legacy. Just belonging. He looked stunned, like the concept had never crossed his mind. I didn't ask for this, I said, voice steady, but I won't apologize for it either. He nodded slowly. So you're keeping it all? I tilted my head. You mean the stuff you assumed would be yours? He didn't answer. Instead, he asked quietly, do you hate me? That one. That made me pause. I searched my chest for the answer, and then I told him the truth. No, I don't hate you. I just don't trust you. That hit harder than anything else could have. I saw it land in his expression. And then I added, softer, but I want better for your daughter than this. So maybe next time you have a chance to stand for someone smaller than you, do it. He swallowed hard. Okay. I opened the door again, letting cold air brush my back. Goodbye, Caleb. He walked away slowly, like he was carrying a truth he'd never held before. Inside, I found my daughter coloring at the table. Who was that? She asked. Just a visitor, I said, kissing the top of her head. She smiled and went back to her drawing. On the paper, a house, a son, a girl holding hands with an older woman. Is that us? I asked. She nodded. It's me and great-grandma. We're the strong ones. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore. It was about legacy. Grandma Ruth insisted we host a Sunday lunch. No better way to draw snakes from the grass than laying out a nice meal, she said, pulling a roast from the oven with the precision of a woman who'd handled both recipes and relatives with equal force. I knew what she was doing. So did she. She'd invited them. My parents, my brother, even my aunt and uncle from upstate. No one refused Ruth. Not even after she rewrote the rules of inheritance on Christmas night. By noon, the house smelled like rosemary, baked bread, and unfinished conversations. They arrived in quiet waves, one by one, each carrying a dish or dessert like an offering to a queen they had underestimated. I stood at the kitchen island, watching my father fidget in the living room, my mother smoothing down the same dress she wore to every event where she wanted to look collected, and Caleb, my brother, avoiding my gaze altogether. But Ruth? She was radiant, calm, in control. When lunch was served, we sat around the long table, the same one where I had eaten as a child, the same one I had once been dismissed from while the adults talked. Now I was at the head of it, and it didn't go unnoticed. Halfway through the meal, my aunt leaned in. "So, Emily, we heard you're now the official keeper of the house. Big shoes to fill." I smiled. They fit perfectly. My mother winced. My dad cleared his throat. The A shifted. Then Grandma spoke. "Let's not pretend we're here to eat. Everyone has questions. So ask." Silence. Then my father. "I think we deserve to know what changed." Grandma nodded. "You do. So let me tell you." She leaned forward, elbows on the table like she was delivering a sermon. Emily showed up on Christmas night expecting nothing, and was turned away like a stranger. I watched it, I felt it, and I realized love has to mean more than blood. She looked around the table. "You all wanted something from me, except her. And so, she got what none of you earned. Trust." My uncle shifted. "But Ruth, this house, this estate, has always stayed within the line." Grandma's eyes narrowed. "She is the line now." My brother spoke next. "So that's it. She owns the house, the land, everything. We just smile and nod." Grandma's voice softened, but didn't waver. "No, you grow. You apologize. You earn your place back." I stood then, heart hammering, but voice firm. "I didn't come here to take anything, but I won't give back what was freely entrusted to me." I looked at my father. "You made it clear there was no room for me." Then at my mother. "You stood behind him while he shut the door." Then at Caleb. "You watched." None of them spoke. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "But I'm not empty either. I've filled the space you left behind, with strength, with truth, and with a little girl who will never wonder if she's enough." Tears welled in my mother's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. My father looked down at his plate. "And Caleb?" He looked away again. Grandma reached for my hand. "I didn't raise you to wait for permission, Emily. I raised you to know your worth, even if the world pretended not to see it." I squeezed her fingers. Later, as the table cleared and the family trickled out in silence or shame, I stood by the window watching them leave. No yelling, no apologies, just doors closing softly and tires crunching snow. And somehow, that was enough. That night, I tucked my daughter into bed and kissed her forehead. "Mommy," she whispered, "are we gonna live here forever?" I paused, then smiled. "No. But we'll never leave unless we choose to. Because this house, it wasn't just a house anymore. It was a line in the sand, and I had stepped over it. For good. The following week, Grandma asked me to accompany her to the bank. She'd already transferred ownership of the house, but there were other matters, accounts, stocks, titles, things she'd once quietly managed behind closed drawers and locked filing cabinets. Now, she was opening every one of them, handing over keys I never even knew existed. "You're the executor now," she said, as we sat in the private office. "It all runs through you." I looked at the stack of folders, savings accounts, trust funds, even a modest art collection she'd built over the years. "Why me?" I finally asked. "Why not split it, make it fair?" She tilted her head, her voice as calm as ever. "Fairness isn't about division, Emily. It's about recognition. You showed up. They didn't. That's the end of the math." The words sat heavy in my chest, not because I doubted her, but because I knew the storm it would bring. And I was right. That evening, a post appeared on Facebook. From my brother's wife. Some people inherit by blood. Others manipulate the vulnerable. Funny how grief brings out greed. I stayed at it for a long time. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I posted back. Some people were invited in. Others were turned away in the cold. Grief didn't bring out greed. It revealed it. The comments poured in. Messages from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Some supportive, some silent, and one from an old friend that made my throat tighten. I remember how your family used to treat you. I'm glad the story flipped. The next day, a letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address. I recognized the cursive immediately. My father. Emily, you've made your point. You always were stubborn like your grandmother. But don't forget who raised you, who paid your bills, who gave you a roof. Maybe you think you've won. But no house, no money, no title can change what's true. You are still our daughter, whether you like it or not. No apology, no accountability, just control in a softer tone. I folded it once and tossed it in the fire, because if they couldn't face what they didn't deserve a place in the life I was building. That evening, Grandma sat beside me by the fire, reading in her worn chair. My daughter was on the floor, building a castle out of wooden blocks. She built walls around it, Grandma said, watching. Smart girl. She said she doesn't want anyone knocking it down, I replied with a soft smile. Grandma nodded, just like her mother. There was pride in her voice, but also something else. Something quiet. Regret. I should have spoken up sooner, she said. When they shut you out after college. When they called you dramatic. When they made you feel like a burden. You were the only one who didn't, I said. Maybe, but silence has weight too. I looked at her then, really looked, at the woman who had spent a lifetime watching, holding it all in, choosing when to speak and when to wait. I forgave you already, I whispered. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. That night, I watched my daughter sleep beside the same window I once stared out of as a little girl, wondering if love would ever feel permanent. Now I knew. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it arrives like snow. Quiet, cold at first, but enough to change everything it touches. 2 weeks later, Grandma Ruth passed away in her sleep. No pain, no warning. Just the soft exhale of a woman who had finished what she came to do. I found her that morning in her favorite chair, glasses still resting on her chest, her hands gently folded. The sun had just started to peek through the window. Her face was peaceful, like she had left in mid-thought, but not unfinished. I didn't cry right away. I wrapped my daughter in a blanket and called the paramedics. Then I made tea, sat on the edge of the couch, and stared at the empty space she left behind, because somehow, even in death, she made it feel full. The funeral was small, by her request. No flowers, no eulogies, just family, and only the ones who had earned the right to say goodbye. My parents came. So did my brother, but none of them spoke. Not during the ceremony. Not after. It was the first time I'd ever seen them without a script. After everyone left, I stayed behind. My daughter stood beside me as we placed one white lily on her casket. She was brave, my daughter said softly. Yes, I whispered, braver than all of us. Back at the house, I opened the letter she had left for me. It was sealed in a navy blue envelope, resting on her nightstand, with my name written in bold, purposeful strokes. Emily, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But I didn't leave you empty-handed. I left you with something stronger than money, stronger than land. Proof that you were never the problem. You were always the proof that they could not break what they didn't understand. I watched you build a life with no blueprint, no cheerleaders. Now build more. Build homes for women like you. Build truth in the places that silence used to live. And when they ask how you did it, tell them your grandmother finally saw you. and gave you back your name, Ruth. I held that letter like scripture. 2 months later, I did what she asked. I founded the Ruth Project, a nonprofit for single mothers abandoned by family, women rebuilding after emotional exile, daughters who were treated like burdens. We launched quietly and exploded. The story went viral, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real, and because, for the first time, women didn't just see me. They saw themselves. Every media outlet reached out. Every podcast wanted an interview, but I only said yes to one. A women-led program that opened each segment with this line: "Whose voice did you silence to keep the peace?" I sat in front of the camera, straight-backed and calm. My daughter watched from the sidelines, holding a notebook she'd decorated with glitter stars and Grandma Ruth's name on the cover. The host asked me, "If you could say one thing to the family who hurt you, what would it be?" I smiled, not out of spite, but out of sovereignty. "I'd say thank you." The host blinked. "Thank you?" "Yes, because without that door being slammed in my face, I might have never known what I deserved. Without that silence, I might have kept chasing noise." Later that night, I sat on the same porch where my father had once told me to leave. Only now, it was mine. My daughter curled beside me under a blanket. The house glowed behind us, warm and full, not with people, but with peace. She looked up and asked, "Do you think Grandma's proud of us?" I wrapped an arm around her and whispered, "She always was. She just waited until we were ready to see it." A breeze passed through the trees, quiet, gentle, unmistakable, and in that moment, I knew. This wasn't a revenge story. It was a reclamation of my place, of my power, of every piece of me they tried to unsee. And now, they'd never be able to look away